Ozone depletion, potential causes and effects. Volcanic eruptions and ozone-depleting substances can cause ozone depletion events which can vastly alter our planet through an increase in UV radiation and weather extremities, having the power to potentially change the Earth as we know it. So why ozone depletion? I chose this topic because ozone depletion is something I've always known about, but I've never really dove too deep in. I knew that aerosols like chlorofluorocarbons diminished our ozone layer and created an ozone hole, but I wanted to understand more about the effects this depletion had on our planet and if there was any other causes for ozone depletion as well. So how does ozone depletion relate to geography? Well, the ozone layer is part of the atmosphere, and the atmosphere is a physical system on our planet. Um, so how physical systems affect human systems? Since the ozone layer is a physical system, the depletion of it can lead to effects on us as humans, as we'll get into farther into the PowerPoint. And human actions, they modify the physical environment, and for this topic of ozone depletion, chemicals produced and utilized by humans have had a direct impact on the ozone layer, modifying our UV levels. So the main points of this argument are to get stronger regulations on ozone depleting substances, to get a reduction in plastic output, garbage, and to just kind of talk about the effects that ozone depletion has on several different factors. So to get into my research methods, I kind of just researched scientific journals, I looked through papers, I read some bigger assessments, some UNEP assessments. So let's just talk about the ozone layer. What it is, it's protection. The ozone layer is a thin layer in the Earth's upper atmosphere that absorbs almost all of the harmful radiation that the sun creates. The ozone layer provides the Earth with essential protection, limiting UV or ultraviolet radiation emitted from the sun from reaching our planet in its entirety. And the ozone layer, it naturally depletes and it naturally forms, but that's a natural balance, and it's altering with the depletion of ozone. We're depleting it so fast that the formation can't keep up with the depletion, and due to this, we could face some destructive altercations to our environment. So just to get some background knowledge on something I'm going to be mentioning just a couple of times is the United Nations Montreal Protocol on substances that deplete the ozone layer. It's a protocol regulates nearly 100 man-made chemicals that are considered ozone-depleting substances. This pact was decided on September 15th, 1987, and it is actually the only United Nations treaty to be adopted by every single member. So for a cause, we're going to talk about ozone-depleting substances. So first, there's more than what's on the list, but these are some of the main key ones that I talked about in my paper and I think are important for everyone to know. And the first are chlorofluorocarbons, or CFCs. CFCs are considered the most damaging of all ozone-depleting substances due to its destruction of ozone molecules at a high rate. They were mass-produced in the 1960s for spray cans like hairspray. They were just aerosols, and they were also used as coolants and refrigerants. And they can live in the atmosphere for over 50 years with a certain form of a CFC. I think it's called a CFC-12, lasting up to 140 years. So it can stay in our atmosphere for a long time, causing destruction. So what happens is that the UV from ultraviolet from the sun, it breaks down CFCs into smaller substances, and one of the smaller substances that come from this are chlorine And chlorine's very dangerous to the ozone, with one chlorine atom being able to destroy more than 100,000 ozone molecules. So, they were eventually banned, not banned, but regulated by the Montreal Protocol, and they were largely replaced by hydrochlorofluorocarbons, HCFCs, which they're not as harmful, but they were introduced as a temporary replacement to CFCs in the 90s and are still in some use today. So, and although they are being replaced now by hydrofluorocarbons, which I don't mention because they don't destroy the ozone, but those are a powerful greenhouse gas attributing to climate change. So we really should be looking for a replacement for the replacement of the replacement. And the last one I have is nitrous oxide. Most people know it as laughing gas. It is actually a dominant ozone depleting substance in the 21st century. It's used a lot. There are estimates that its emissions will be nearly double by 2050, and it's unregulated currently by the Montreal Protocol. So it would be very beneficial, I believe, for the planet's sake, if they were able to put some limitations, a protocol, something regarding nitrous oxide. And the second cause I have is volcanic emissions. So we have sulfuric acid. The emissions which come from these volcanic eruptions include sulfuric acid, a chemical which actually consumes ozone if it reaches high enough points into the atmosphere. And depending on where these volcanoes are taking place, it can cause an increase in the polar vortex. So in a study, more of a paper done in November 2010 on Mount Merapi on Java, Indonesia, it erupted, right? And it resulted in one of the strongest ozone depletion events in the northern hemisphere during the past 39 years. This was back in 2011, this was taking place. And despite it being located far from the Arctic polar vortex up in the northern hemisphere, it caused the vortex to enlarge, and researchers and other studies have concluded that a larger polar vortex allows for greater amounts of ozone to be depleted. So, one of the effects ozone has when it's depleted, as we talked about before, it limits the amount of UV radiation that can get through. Now, UV radiation has effects on various things, humans, aquatic ecosystems, terrestrial ecosystems. So, first we're going to talk about the radiation on humans, the effects that it can have. So, uh, quoted by Nunes in 2019, he says, without the Montreal Protocol, the United States would have seen an additional 280 million cases of skin cancer, 1.5 million skin cancer deaths, and 45 million cataracts. And the world would be at least 25% hotter. So think about all the potential lives that this protocol saved, and the importance of the ozone layer in being able to keep UV radiation out. And right now we're kind of seeing higher and higher levels continue to rise. Say in May and June of 2018, there was a record high ultraviolet radiation index over the Nordic countries, ranging from a 20 to 40% greater than average number, quoted by Bernhard. Um, so the effect of UV radiation on aquatic ecosystems. So solar UV radiation has been known to degrade plastics in the micro and nanoplastics, very small, very, very small pieces, some not even, they're barely visible to the human eye, possibly even smaller than grains of sand, and these can increase the consumption and ingestion of these byproducts by aquatic organisms. Think of the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. You have that huge, Great Pacific Garbage Patch. You have all that plastic floating in the ocean, right? The sun beating on it all day, all day. The ultraviolet that's coming through, it's breaking down the plastic into small molecules, and those molecules are falling to the ocean floor. And say a whale comes by, sees some good looking krill, he wants to bite some. He could be taking a good amount of really small pieces of plastic into his body can really harm aquatic animals in that locality. Um, so in organic sunscreens, it's actually shown that they pose harmful effects on marine ecosystems and in particular types of corals. It's harmful enough that the state of Hawaii has actually banned the sale and distribution of organic sunscreens. Well, they haven't banned it yet. It's going to be effective January, so in less than a month now, it'll be effective. And that's because there is zinc oxide within some of these sunscreens, and uncoated zinc oxide can actually induce coral bleaching, which can be devastating to coral reefs around the world. The effect of UV on terrestrial ecosystems is declined plant productivity. A field study which took place in a high latitude location has shown that plant productivity declines by around 3% for every 10% increase in UV radiation. And a team of researchers estimated that crop productivity would have been at a loss of more than 90% had it not been for the Montreal Protocol, although it is not nearly certain as the study didn't involve lower latitude locations, mid latitude, different types of plants, whatever. But it's still something to note and to take a piece out of. So in one case, you have invasive species coming too, and in one case, a tropical pasture grass located in the Andes of Ecuador is being completely pushed out by an invasive fern, which is better adapted to higher UV radiation levels along elevational gradients. So another effect is weather altercations. You get ozone depletion has been known to influence rainfall patterns, specifically in Southern America. The ozone hole has stretched a rain band in the southeastern South America, creating more rainfall and decreased heat in certain regions. And another study took place which resulted in finding that this area is growing in potential for large cyclones due to cyclones' favorability towards heavy rainfall and mild heat. And so in conclusion, I think that I found that more regulations and studies need to be done on potential ozone depleting substances, as it's very important that the ozone layer stays strong, stays the way it is. It can recover. I mean, it's still in recovery from the 1980s, when in 1985 they discovered the hole was there and they started patching it up, but it needs to still be monitored and limited. Things like nitrous oxide is still such a huge ozone depleting substance, and it's not even on the Montreal Protocol's list yet, you know? And active volcanoes need to be monitored closely, although I'm sure they are monitored closely, but I think those who are monitoring closely need to keep in mind potential outcomes. What's the makeup of the material inside the volcano, what that can do to the atmosphere, what's the power of that volcano. If it explodes, is there sulfuric acid that can reach high enough amounts to damage the ozone layer? What are some precautions that we could take into mind and consideration? That seems to be very important. And to finish it off, we know that ozone depletion increased UV radiation, and it still can, it still will change UV radiation. It's our shield from UV radiation. So obviously, if we don't have it, we're not gonna have the protection that we need, and maybe we'll have to wear more sunblock. Maybe we'll have to keep our skin out. Maybe a beach could be a dangerous place. But not only that, it can change weather patterns, and those rainfall patterns can have serious effects on the environments which is happening. If a generally dry area suddenly just starts getting tons of rainfall for months and months, those plants that are used to taking little water will get over flooded and possibly die, or maybe a new invasive species will come in and get rid of all those wonderful species that should be in those locations. But thank you for listening to my final project about ozone depletion and the causes and effects. Thank you.